I'm excited about tonight. In a sense, we've been messing around with Egypt for too long, and I've tried to show more about the future of Israel than them dealing with the present calamities. And so hopefully as we get going here, we can pick up a little bit of speed. I don't think we're going to pick up too much today, but even a chapter today is going to be
well, we're starting on verse 29, aren't we?
Verse 29 is where we're starting. Yeah. And the 10th plague, and it was kind of, the 10th plague followed Passover.
Oh, really?
I mean,
Passover hadn't happened.
Passover, we read all about Passover. I mean, we read about the feast Passover meal.
Yes.
And that's what I was saying. And so that's the 10th, and it was like he talks about about what they did in preparation. You go out and get your lambs and do all this, and he gives the explanation that, hey, the calendar's going to be changing. You're going to start, all of history starts today, January 1st. And on the 10th, you'll go out and get a lamb and bring it in and do all the stuff. And that's what it was telling Israel to do. And so, and then Moses keeps telling Pharaoh, here's what you got to do. And Pharaoh ultimately, says, no, I'm get out of here. I'm not going to do it. In verse 29 of Exodus 12, it says, and it came to pass at midnight that the Lord struck all of the firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh who sat on his throne to the firstborn of the captive who was in the dungeon. Now, I don't know a physical situation that would distinguish between firstborn and secondborn. Are you firstborn? Yes. Bang, you're dead. It's like, why? And we don't have any explanation other than God said, this is me. I'm doing this, not the environment or circumstances. That's me doing it. So I don't see any way you could atmospherically call this a coincidence with nature. This was God saying, The invisible God is breaking into the human era. And he's saying it's time. And so Abraham, Isaac, and now Jacob, for 400 years, God is patient. He's not in a hurry. And I think if we look at this like, why did God wait 400 years? And it's like, well, if he knew that the atmospheric conditions were going to be totally disruptive, and the timing would work, he would be able to tell them, okay, here's what's getting ready to happen. So it's like God foreknew these things, and in his timing, he started this mess. I mean, it had to have been put in place, and this radical element called a comet is floating around the universe, not attached to a particular sun. That's just, we can't explain what it, but it's a mass that has some control over it, because there's, and I'm going to read a little bit of Velikovsky, because he defines a couple of things that really help understand the severity of what was going on. This wasn't like a tornado or a hurricane. This was a total blow it away. Everything on the earth was blown away. I mean, wherever it went, it destroyed everything. So I was trying to understand, number one, if we've got 2 to 3 million people and all of their livestock and animals, if you take a newborn lamb, you're going to need 1 to 3 million newborn lambs, or one per household. And we're talking a large number of whatever it is you need: food, shelter. God has got a logistic nightmare on his hands, taking care of 2 million people in the wilderness. So that's going on, besides the harassment of the Egyptians. So Pharaoh rose in the night, he and all of his servants and all of the Egyptians. And there was a great cry in Egypt, for there was not a house where there was not one dead. So it hit every house. Somebody passed away. And again,
you had the blood of the lamb.
and it was like that has to ultimately be, God said, you will remember the firstborn. I'm going to give my firstborn, and it's going to cost lost humanity their firstborn. And I don't know if it happened all over the world, but what I'm going to read to you in a little bit is pretty convincing that something was going on to make this event notable by all nations. So 31 says, then he called for Moses and Aaron by night and said, rise and go out from among my people, both you and the children of Israel, and go serve the Lord as you have said. And again, I'm trying to tie all this together with reality. Okay?
Yes.
What does serve the Lord? They go out there and serving the Lord ends up being sacrificing a lamb, worshiping God with the death of a yearling lamb. And it's like, okay, what's going on here? And so we're trying to comprehend what this invisible God is doing with this event. It's not just getting people out of here. This is God making a people into his people. And what God did, as I've said this in the past, is that God had to keep them as a unit. They had to be, they couldn't marry outside of their tribe. So this people, where in the world would you go that you didn't mingle with the neighbors and the Egyptians? They, for 400 years, they were isolated in the land of Goshen, and it was like God had to keep them there for 400 years to get the numbers up. It said that there were 600,000 soldiers. Now that's a pretty good sized army. You know, that's over 500,000 troops with I don't know what type of armor and stuff they had, but Israel was, I mean, they couldn't develop an arsenal because they were slaves.
Yeah.
So, anyway, so here God is preparing this people for something. And the something happens to be going into the promised land and kicking out everybody, actually killing a lot of people. Just wiping out man, woman, child, and animals. And of course, we civilized humans are saying that's not the God of the New Testament. That's the God of the Old Testament. Because we try to comprehend, you know, our morality and ethics and values. What could we know about any group of people that would make them worthy of destruction? And their children and their animals. No, that's not God. That's Satan. You know, and the world is not going to accept that. But so we're thinking in our back of our minds, what is God doing? What is this all about? Also, take your flocks and your herds, as you have said, and be gone, and bless me also. By the way, don't forget to put a good word in for me somewhere. Yeah, after the 10 plagues you've just refused, we're going to put a good word in. No.
I like the next verse.
And the Egyptians urged the people that they might send them out of the land in haste. Get the Jews out of here. That's what the Egyptians were saying.
Yeah.
That's what the Palestinians are saying. Get the Jews, let's kill them all. We don't want them here. And it's like God saying, it isn't them you better be concerned about. It's me. You're messing with my people. That's my bride you're messing with. We're going to have a child, and he's going to redeem the world from its sin. Don't you? And of course, they didn't understand that. And for they said, we shall all be dead. And there's more to that than meets the eye. What is getting ready to happen would also have happened to Israel if they had not gone with Moses. And when you read what took place after this, that's what would have happened to the people of God. And God took them, and he's working with them, and he's getting them primed to go in and take the promised land. So that's at the back of what God's doing. He's getting a people, and it took 40 years. As I said, 3 days to get out of Egypt, 140 years to get Egypt out of them, and it ended up costing all those elders who left their lives because they were stiff-necked, rebellious people. And so the people took their dough, not their money, but their dough, before it was leavened. So they hadn't put any rising in it. It was unleavened dough. And they wrapped it up, and that was one of the most important. Now, every household said, you're getting ready to go on a journey. And you have to go for 7 days with unleavened bread. That was the command. And so they've got their unleavened dough wrapped up in a cloth and probably have a little bit of dampness to it, and to keep it. I'm not even going to go back and try to find that. I just know that.
Found 19.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the reason for that is it's the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And for 7 days, they are not allowed today. For 7 days, they have to eat unleavened bread. You can't have any leaven in the house. That's the modern Jews would say that's the procedure is get the kids and we're going to go through the house, clean it, and purge it of all leaven. And that's what they did. And so the people took their dough before it was leavened, having their kneading bowls bound up in their clothes, on their shoulders. Now, if you were getting ready to boogie, what would you take? You know? Well, we've got all the silver and gold of the Egyptians. We've got the livestock, and we've got our dough. It's like, okay, that's good. Now the children of Israel had done according to the word of Moses. And they had asked for the Egyptians articles of silver and articles of gold and clothing. So they literally stripped all the stuff that the Egyptians had and took it.
I had in mind the Egyptians gave it to him and said, go.
They did. They said,
They just wanted to
they didn't say,
Quiet.
Yeah.
they didn't say, get the heaven out of here. They said, get out of here.
Yeah, they didn't say,
Take
get the
here, take all my clothes, all my silver and gold, anything, just because everything we've experienced so far, we're lucky to be alive.
Yeah,
we know
should
that.
have left 3 months ago.
And I don't know how many of them actually survived what the rest of the world was going to go through that we don't know about. And the Lord had given the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians, so that they granted them what they requested. Thus they plundered the Egyptians. And I love how that is, you know, it wasn't just, it took stuff for their journey. God stripped Egypt of all of its wealth overnight.
And their slaves.
Yeah.
And their slaves.
And their slaves, that's right. These people were their brick makers. Then the children of Israel journeyed from Ramses to Succoth. About 600,000 men on foot, besides children. So that's so we've got 600,000. That's
Looks like
a
about
1,000,002 with man and wife, and
2 children. So you got 2 million people.
and however many children they had. And again, this is the beginning. I mean, they got 40 years to multiply. And if you're just living out in the wilderness and all you got's your wife and your kids and the manna you got to go out and get in the morning, and it's like, I imagine that the birth rate, nobody died except the old folks, and it was like God said, you. So the whole new generation, and Mark had mentioned that you know, sounds like that was part of the plan to get, and it probably was. God said, I need fresh folks who are understanding of what just happened. Your life is now mine. That lamb that died was your death, and you're mine now. And God said, you are now my people. So that's what's going on. A mixed multitude. And here, you know, the strangers and the people that happen to be passing through that like this people, they became Jews. So it says it's a mixed multitude. So it's not just Jews alone. And again, it references Numbers 11:4.
I just looked that up and it just uses the same words.
Okay.
It doesn't define
And
it.
Deuteronomy 3:19 says probably the same thing.
It talks about the livestock.
A mixed multitude went up with them also, and flocks and herds, a great deal of livestock. I mean, we're talking 2 million people. Let's just call it 2 at this point. 2 million
2
people
million people.
with their livestock, that they've been thriving abundantly, which means that everybody's got sheep and goats and camels, and they've got everything. And they baked unleavened bread cakes of the dough which they had brought out of Egypt, for it was not leavened, because they were driven out of Egypt and could not wait, nor had they prepared provisions for themselves. So all they had was this wad of unleavened dough bread. That was what they were going to live on. As far as they knew, if God didn't provide something, we're in trouble. And logistically, can you see God being the shepherd?
Yeah.
Of this mass of people? And all he had was Moses and Aaron to direct the people, and they had to trust them. And so far, this has been a rocky year.
Oh boy.
Man.
Oh, look at how many plagues just came.
We've seen all hell break loose on earth.
That's for sure.
Now the sojourn of the children of Israel who lived in Egypt was 430 years.
Wow.
So that tells us right there that they were there 430 years.
Wow. That's how long they were.
And it came to pass as the end of 430 years, so that number is significant, and I haven't really determined what 430 years, you know, 7 times 7 is 490, so 30, that's 470. So, you know, there's got to be some explanation for it. On that very same day it came to pass that all the armies of the Lord went out from the land of Egypt. It is a night of solemn observance to the Lord for bringing them out of the land of Egypt. This is that night of the Lord, a solemn observation for all the children of Israel throughout their generations. God is saying, you will remember this day forever. God in 10,000 millennia, we're going to remember Egypt. We're going to remember the people of God taking the promised land. And every Passover, they will recite all of the miracles that God had performed for them. And throughout the whole Old Testament, it references this. And the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, this is the ordinance of the Passover. No foreigner shall eat it, but every man's servant who is bought for money, when you have circumcised him, then he may eat it. So, circumcision, again, is the act of shedding blood over procreation. I mean, the instrument of procreation, if you can imagine, was circumcised. The flesh was removed, and that circumcision was the sign, and it again, we're talking about the shedding of blood. You will remember the shedding of blood. And everything they did was about the shedding of blood.
Yes, there was so much in that era.
A sojourner and a hired servant shall not eat it. In one house it shall be eaten. You shall not carry any of the flesh outside of the house, nor shall you break one of its bones. All the congregation of Israel shall keep it. And when a stranger dwells with you and wants to keep the Passover to the Lord, let all his males be circumcised. And then let him come near and keep it. So, for the, and you know, when we watch the movie, The Ten Commandments, we see Egyptians that were making friends with Israelites. After the curses, they're saying, hey, you know, we want our allegiance to be with you all. We'll do whatever it takes. But in the movie, it doesn't show any of this part of it. Of course, the blood of the Lamb is the only thing that really cries out in remembrance. So all of this stuff is just trivia to the average reader. And he shall be as a native of the land. So you have just become Jewish. Now, again, they don't have a tribe. They're not purebred Jews. But they've realized that I don't want to stay here and die. I'm all in favor of going with you. Whatever it takes, I'm willing. For no uncircumcised person shall eat it. So that's...
And what do they eat what? Eat the
Eat the Passover lamb.
Passover lamb.
And again, you know, every male must be circumcised. They cannot eat of the Passover lamb. And see, circumcision in Christianity is likened to baptism. And baptism becomes circumcision. So it's like no one can come to Christ but those who are baptized. You know, you're not joining the church unless you are baptized. That's the essence of what the church has done. You know, this is, Paul says, circumcision is like baptism. So it's like we try to rationalize all this.
Yes.
And one law shall be for the native born and for the stranger who dwells among you. The law of Moses is the law. Maybe I'll get turned here. Thus all the children of Israel did as the Lord commanded Moses and Aaron, and so they did. And it came to pass on that very same day that the Lord brought the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt according to their army. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, consecrate to me all the firstborn, whatever opens the womb among the children of Israel, both of man and beast. It is mine. So the firstborn child of every Jew was the Lord's. The firstborn animal of every flock was the Lord's. That was the law. This is what you will do. And Moses said to the people, remember this day in which you went out of Egypt, out of the house of bondage, for by strength of hand the Lord brought you out of this place. No leavened bread shall be eaten. On this day you are going out in the month of Abib. That became the first month. In Jewish, Abib is the first day of the month for the Jews. And it shall be when the Lord brings you into the land of the Canaanites and the Hittites and the Amorites and the Hivites and the Jebusites, which he swore to your fathers to give you, a land flowing with milk and honey, that you shall keep this service in this month. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread, and on the 7th day there shall be a feast of the Lord. Unleavened bread shall be eaten 7 days, and no leavened bread shall be seen among you, nor shall leaven be seen among you in all of your quarters. And you shall tell your sons in that day, saying, this is done because of what the Lord did for me when I came out of Egypt. It shall be a sign to you on your hand and on a memorial between your eyes. They all had phylacteries that they used to have right here, and it was a remembrance. On the doorpost they would have the Shema, and it was like that was what they did. It shall be a sign to you on your hand and on as a memorial between your eyes, that the Lord's law may be in your mouth. For with a strong hand the Lord has brought you out of Egypt. And you shall therefore keep this ordinance in its season from year to year. And it shall be when the Lord brings you into the land of the Canaanites, as he swore to you and your fathers, and gives it to you, that you shall eat part of the Lord.
Set apart.
You shall set apart to the Lord all that open the womb. That is, every firstborn that comes from an animal which you have, the male shall be the Lord's. But every firstborn of a donkey you shall redeem with a lamb. And if you will not redeem it, then you shall break its neck. And all the firstborn of man among your sons you shall redeem. What is this invisible God doing with all these sheep? Lambs. I mean, with Abraham, Noah, and God shows them to clean animals. And so he has the sheep and the goats. They had 7 of them, but everything else they had just 2. So it shall be when your son asks you in times to come, what is this? That you shall say to him, by strength of hand the Lord brought us out of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. And it came to pass when Pharaoh was stubborn about letting us go, that the Lord killed all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both the firstborn of man and the firstborn of beast. Therefore I sacrifice to the Lord all males that open the womb. But all the firstborn of my sons I redeem. So there's probably 10 sermons in that passage right there.
But it says here that it was in the land of Egypt, not maybe necessarily all over the world, but it was in the land of Egypt.
But the people of God were only, so this applies to Israel. But the other stuff that's getting, let's go, it shall be as a sign on your hand and on your frontlets between your eyes, for by strength of hand the Lord brought us out of Egypt. Then it came to pass when Pharaoh had let the people go, that God did not lead them by way of the land of the Philistines, although that was near. So they're coming out of Egypt, and Philistia was right up here on the coast. They could have just made a little, gone up there and taken them, but that's where the giants. And so God said, no, we're going to go, and we've got things we've got to do, because you can't kill the giants on your own. You can't deal with the promised land. These people are giants, and they will eat your lunch. So you have no choice but to trust me with this. I'm gonna take you in. We're gonna take the promised land, but it's gonna be my doing, not yours. You have nothing to do with this except you show up. I'm going to go on down to 14. I wanted to read Velikovsky tonight, but I'll wait because it really starts with the crossing of the Red Sea. Then it came to pass when Pharaoh had let the people go, that God did not lead them by way of the land of the Philistines, although that was near. For God said, lest perhaps the people change their minds when they see war. So the people had not experienced war. And God said, when you're faced with an army out there, they're going to kill you. they're going to string you up and eat you for lunch. Then it shall come to pass, then it came to pass when Pharaoh had let the people go that God, okay, I said that, yeah. They didn't go to Philistia. They went the land of the Philistines. So God led the people around by way of the wilderness of the Red Sea. So instead of going up and to an easy route, he took them to the Red Sea, and there was no way over. So you could either go up by the coast and hit the giants, but they weren't ready for the giants yet. They had a lot to do between now and the 40 years to get ready for that. So God led the people around by way of the wilderness of the Red Sea, and the children of Israel went up in orderly ranks out of the land of Egypt. They're marching. And Moses took the bones of Joseph with him, for he had placed the children of Israel under solemn oath, saying, God will surely visit you, and you shall carry up my bones from here with you. See, God had promised the land was going to be theirs. And so that never left Joseph's mind or Israel's. The promised land is ours. God is in this with us. And so now God has got to make this people his. And so they took their journey from Succoth and camped in Etham at the edge of the wilderness. And the Lord went before them by day in a pillar of cloud to lead the way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, so as to go by day and night. He did not take away the pillar of cloud or by day, or by the pillar of fire by night from before the people. And that is going to be a significant. Mark, would you close us in prayer?
Sure. Dear Heavenly Father, it's nice to speak with you again. Thanks for bringing us all together and letting us enjoy and dive into your word and learn more about what we're supposed to learn in life instead of so much in this physical world. Help us all out on our journeys this week. Bless my grandchildren that they finally come home this week and finally get to reunite our family so we can feel whole again. We ask all these things in your name, Lord.
Amen.